Hello friends, this is Growl. In this video I'm going to be going over a 28 Junkyard we did last week during Fortified Bolstering Skittish. Junkyard is, I would say, the easiest dungeon of the season, although it's still pretty important to understand what's going on here if you want to time high keys. The first thing to note is there are bots littered throughout the map. Each bot gives a buff that lasts for the entire dungeon as long as you don't die. The most important of which is the shock bots that give you a buff to your damage. It is a very, very large buff. And so the first part of any good Junkyard run is the whole team splitting up Delta formation style, running in and grabbing shock bots for everybody. Now we're starting our first pull. You'll see that I blind Barkskin right away. This is because these mobs have a cast that can hurt you, and we don't have our team fully here right away, so I'm worried about those casts going through on myself. If a couple of them go off, they can hurt you pretty bad. There are several bots here. There's 2 weldings and 1 shock bot, so you'll find that most teams will do this pull first. It's a good way to expend your lust quickly, and at the same time grab a couple bots in the meantime. You'll see that we opt to not lust this pull. In general, this is not that difficult of a pull, but it's just a lot of count that you can get some value with lust because everyone's got their cooldowns up. So there's 3 different bots scattered throughout the map. There's a defense one, a haste one, and the zap bot. I'll grab the defense one here. All of us are pre-assigned to which bots that we grab. In pugs, I would say it's a free-for-all, and you probably want to grab as many as you can get. But in a more organized setting, it's a good idea to know who's grabbing what. These gnome-eating droplets are a ton of group damage, so you have to be ready to do a lot of AoE burst healing. You'll see that I'm running Ever-Rising Tide Major in here. Because of the zap bots that actually scale with key level, you do not need much damage here, even in very, very high keys. So I choose to run Ever-Rising Tide to help with my burst healing. We go in the Blob Obelisk. One important thing that we've been doing on this specific obelisk is to run right away. Generally, it's not a good idea to run with these obelisks. You want to fight and just kill stuff. But with this particular one, you want to run in order to snap all these tentacles close together so that you can cleave them down. The obelisks die very, very easily in Junkyard because you have these bot buffs. They're essentially the same difficulty as any other key at a 28, but we are much, much stronger. You'll see the damage in the pull, like I'm doing 100k DPS, just doing nothing but Sunfire. This is mostly contributed to the bot damage. I believe somewhere in the neighborhood of 60% of my damage at the end of the key is just from the zap bots alone. We make quick work of this blob. So the way this dungeon works is there's 3 different bosses that you could go to. However, there is a aerial suppression unit that flies around the map, and each week it goes over the bosses in a different order, sort of like the doors in Waycrest. So you have to go to specific bosses in specific orders sometimes. So this week the bot was over Gunker first, so we cannot go to Gunker or it will activate the hard mode, which is not very useful to us because we don't need the achievements or anything for that. I think it's kind of a neat thing that switches up the routes that you do. It's sort of the same way as Waycrest, except for you know ahead of time where the suppression unit is going. These Borks are really nasty frontal. It can be tough to see them on the ground here, so you'll notice I'm playing top down for this pull just so I can see better. It shouldn't kill you in one hit, but you should still look to avoid them because it puts a very large haste debuff on you. Your team can also stun the Borks. I believe they don't recast. So this is the most dangerous pull. There's a pretty heavy tank damage guy and 2 blasters. You'll see I use Ursul's Vortex right away on pull. This stops those blasters from using their run and gun to get far away, and it keeps all the mobs grouped together. This is especially important for a week like this with bolstering because you want all the mobs to die evenly. it's very common for the run and gun guys to get spread out and not die, and then they get giga bolstered and they kill. You can see how hard this one's hitting. It brought me to like half health, even with how much versatility I have. This is a pretty easy pull, but it's sort of necessary, and there's nothing else that we're doing to the rest of this room, so we just have to pull this separately anyway. You'll see that I'm running Mass Root. You don't get much value from Typhoon in this dungeon, and you can use Mass Root to help with the bots on the last boss, so that's a change that I make. Otherwise, I'm running my normal versatility build with Soul Prosperity. I also have been using Stonebark. I like it with this specific comp where it's mostly either our tank or mage taking damage. So we do a strategy here where we pull Trixie and Naeno behind the shed. You can actually pull them quite far without having them reset. So what we do is we pull the boss and then we all line of sight back here, and Trixie will run over. That way the bosses don't zip around the room, and also they do not zip towards the tank mob that does a lot of damage. The tank mob is really slow and can be dangerous on fortified, so we do this strategy specifically so that we don't have to pull the tank mob. This may be a little bit difficult to execute in pugs. It probably doesn't save too much time, and any time that you have to explain to your team what they're doing is going to probably offset the gain. So you may just want to pull the tank normally and then do the boss normally in a pug, but this is a nice way to save a little bit of time. You'll also notice with our comp, all 3 of our DPS have immunities, so if they are selected by the Megatase, they can just immune it. That's part of this strategy as well. If you're doing a high key and if you have a DPS that can immune it, like a warrior for example, you may not want to do this strategy. So the Naeno guy does happen to go out, so it's a good idea to focus him when he comes back. If you kill one of them first, the other one gets empowered. Trixie isn't too bad when she's empowered, but Naeno will basically kill your whole team in 5 seconds if you kill Trixie first. So it's important that you either cleave them evenly like that or finish Naeno first. So next we are going to Trog. We could go to Gunker here as well, but we opt to go to the Trog area, King Gobbamak. So these grunters are actually some of the most dangerous parts of the dungeon. They do not have an aggro table, and they just randomly fixate. They do a pretty hefty amount of melee damage, and they also get bolstered. So you have to be careful with pulling them with other mobs and then bolstering them. They can very quickly do insane amounts of damage. You can see we're taking this area quite slow. We're pulling the scrap bot with a few grunters, then focusing down the grunters because they're the dangerous mobs. Then we're pulling in some more grunters to finish off with the last scrap bot. In lower keys, you could pull this area a bit faster, but we're practicing. This is actually the 28 that we did before our 29, which I've already uploaded to YouTube, so I didn't want to do the commentary of that one. But this is a practice route for the 29 we're about to do. It's important to be vigilant with Fish Feast here as a healer, because these grunters will put you in global combat if any of your team pulls them near you. So you have to make sure that you're sipping on your drinks and your Fish Feast right away, or communicate to your team that you need mana. Normally you can just wait back and drink, but with these specific mobs you can't do that, so you may need some communication. The bullies are the other dangerous part of this area. The shockwave will kill you in 1 hit. Almost anybody. I think even a tank it kills in 1 hit. So you always have to keep an eye out on the bully. I have a sound on my DBM assigned to the bully shockwave. That way I always know when one's going out and I can look for it. The bully also has a tank mechanic that will target the near player if the tank is not in range. So it's important for the tank to always stay in range of the bullies. If you see the tank is having to kite, maybe it's a necrotic week or a sanguine week, and the tank gets far away from the bullies, make sure that you're not near the bullies, because they will use their head cracker or whatever it's called on you. This is a pull with a trash tosser. Like the blasters, it's a good idea to use your Ursul's Vortex on the Trash Tossers to keep them grouped in because they can jump around. Also, these grinders have an enrage. You can see that I set one of the grinders as my focus here in this pull. That way I can quickly focus soothe it if I need to. The damage bonus on those grinders is actually pretty big. So you can see I'm drinking right away, making sure to stay top mana in case we chain pull. This can be a difficult area in terms of visibility because the bully will kill you in one hit with the shockwave as well as those swirlies from the trash tosser. It can be hard to see, so I kind of stand on the far end of this just to give myself a little bit more visibility in and out. Our bear gets knocked off, and you can see Junkrat cheats there because he gets hit by the bully's tank mechanic because the bear got knocked off or whatever happened there. I'm being careful here. You see this red X towards these grunters. It's really important, again, that we don't pull these grunters in later on and get them bolstered. Although they don't bolster the other mobs, the grunters do themselves bolster. And just as I say that, it looks like I pulled those two grunters. So I let my team quickly know, and we focus them down. This is a little conservative, pulling two grunters at a time, but these can be really dangerous mobs. You see how hard they're hitting me, even with a very high amount of versatility that I have. Once they get low, we chain them into some mobs. Again, we're taking this area pretty slow because this is one of the more dangerous areas of the route. This malfunctioning scrap bot drops a dust cloud that acts as a line of sight, this exhaust right here. So the tank is going to want to be kiting that. You have to be careful that your team isn't fighting stuff near that. You may want to use Ursul's Vortex and Typhoon to try and keep the trash tossers or any other mobs from going in that exhaust cloud. It can be really difficult if stuff goes in there because it does passive damage and it's a line of sight, and everyone knows line of sight is a healer's best friend, Cap. So we have this area mostly cleared. The scrap bot is beating up the bear. We have this one pull with the bullies. They have a pretty heavy tank damage spell, the head crack, and so you have to be careful here. You'll see our tank uses bark skin right away on pull. I think I might throw an iron bark here on him as well. Hopefully I do. I'm focused. Maybe I don't focus the bully, but I'm ready to soothe it in case the enrage gets off. Looks like maybe I'm holding my bark because our tank has his bark and incarn up. I'm starting to run low on mana, but there's no more pulling that goes on here. Most of these pulls are pretty lax, and maybe skip ahead 20 seconds or so. So this can be a difficult boss with a lot of burst healing required, so you want to make sure you're full mana here before pulling this. So the way this boss works is you want to soak his charge and then go into the little electrical things after. So this boss has a pretty specific spell queuing order. So right away on pull, you want to be ramping a lot of hots. You'll see I use Ever-Rising Tide. I put my F-Flow down. I have rejuves on everybody. Because right away within the first 8 seconds of the fight, the boss casts Rumble and then immediately does a charge slam after. Charge smash. So you have to be ready to top everyone quickly. So you'll see that I'm using my Ever-Rising Tide for the extra healing to get everyone boosted up. I think I might bark skin our mage here, or iron bark rather. And yeah, our mage is getting hit hard, but we managed to top him just in time. So that overlap happens twice in a row in reverse. So the first one goes Rumble into Charge Smash, then the second one goes Charge Smash into Rumble. So be very aware of the beginning of this fight. It can get pretty nasty. As soon as that Charge Smash hits, you have some downtime here to apply all your cat dots and get a big rip up. Then you can see again the overlap that's about to happen. Now it's going to go Charge Smash into Rumble. So again, I'm using my Ever-Rising Tide. I'm ramping up hots because I know big damage is coming. I get all my rejuves out, and then just as the Rumble is about to hit, I Wild Growth, and then I use my Trank. Since the boss is dying so quickly because of the Zap bots, I'm not really too worried about managing my mana. I also have an Innervate available if I need it. We decided to lust this boss just because it works out, and we want to have lust available for the last boss. It's not super important, but Can be good if you, especially on a tyrannical week. So you'll see now this third charge smash is not an overlap. It does not happen with anything. So you don't have to worry about this one too much. There's nothing going on during the charge smash, but the first two can get nasty, and then the next two will get nasty as well. So that's essentially the cycle. It goes rumble, charge smash, then charge smash, rumble, then only charge smash. And then now we're repeating the cycle. So this next one is going to be rumble and then charge smash. So again, I'm pressing my ever rising tide. You can see it's up to 28%, which isn't super high, but still plenty. And then we ramp up the hots. So I'm grabbing mana here. You'll see that we are going to this pack back here. This can be a good idea if you have some deaths across your team, because if you look in the back there, there's 2 grease spots there actually. So at this point in the dungeon, if you've had a couple deaths and your team doesn't have all grease spots, you can come back and kill this pack as sort of a backup to get those 2 grease spots, which is nice. You don't have to go too far, and this pack is reasonable count. One thing that we're doing is we're trying to avoid the big pack of grunters and the bully and the other stuff by the tank buster obelisk. It can be good count, especially on lower keys. It's not too unsafe, but since we're playing safe because it's big IO, we're going to not pull that pack, and instead we need to look for a little bit of extra percent to pull. So now that we got that pack, we can go straight into this obelisk right here. You can see that pack over there with those world markers. That's a pack that's pretty commonly done because it's worth a lot of percent. But in this situation, we don't need to do it. So this tank buster is going to die really fast. You'll probably should be used to your tank just running right away. Wherever you end up needing to tank this guy, whether it's back to Gunker in our case, or if you've done this as the last boss of the 3, you're taking this guy to the gnome area up top. But either way, your tank almost needs to run right away with this guy. It's going to die really, really fast because of the zap bots. Here we're just doing cat stuff, but ultimately our damage doesn't matter too much. Again, you can see how much the zap bots is amplifying our damage. I'm doing 100k DPS overall, even though I haven't hardly contributed much at all. We're bringing this guy back to Gunker's area. Remember, we had to skip Gunker because of the hard mode bot that was active above the area. But now that we've cleared 2 bosses, the hard mode guy is gone. So now we can come back safely and not have to worry about the little shock bots. If you don't know what area the hard mode is active, you can just look up in the sky or your map. Or in the worst case scenario, if you enter an area and it starts spawning the walkie-shockies, you just need to get out of there. So this area, you have to pull a little bit carefully because there are mobs that require kicks, and the slimes also require a lot of burst healing. You can see that we're using this pipe here. It acts as sort of a wall that you don't get pulled into the monstrosity. This consume cast is really, really, really overtuned. If you get that debuff on you in a higher key, you're almost certainly going to die. Now that we've got the monstrosity low, we've pulled in some other things. Because the slime is heavy group damage, I'm going to be ramping my healing here. You see I pop Ever Rising Tide. I make sure I get my F-low down and rejuves on everybody. That's sort of my default. Wild Charge is great for this area because you can quickly just Wild Charge out of the consume, but it's not necessary, and you could be running renewal in this dungeon as well. All of these lurkers and slime elementals have casts that are pretty important to kick. Otherwise, they're not too dangerous on the tank, but you still have to be careful with how much you're pulling here. You can see the way our group and our tank manages bolstering. We're pulling these big guys first and focusing on the big guys, and then once we deal damage to them, we'll pull the other small guys after. So these slime elementals have a charge sort of spell called Slime Wave, I believe. In our group, we're very coordinated with stopping it because it does very high amounts of damage. But in pugs, you have to be very careful. That would be the mob I would be looking out for, those slime elementals, and be ready for that to do charges. you can actually stop the charge with your abilities. For example, Ursul's Vortex and Master Root both stop the charge. So for that slime wave there, you can see our rogue had blinded that one. If you're in a pug, be ready to stop those yourself, especially if they're aimed at allies, or at the very worst, be ready to move out of them, because the charge is quite slow. So in order to activate Gunker, you need to clear all 3 of these toxic monstrosities. You have to free the squirt bots, I think they're called. I don't know the names of everything quite well. I just heal. This other one is kind of buried far into the slimy swamp area, so you have to pull some stuff that you don't otherwise want to. There's lots of bots spread around. You can see there's a haste bot right there. There's actually 2 haste bots very close. It's a good idea to have a good knowledge of where all the bots are. That way, let's say you have a death here, or some, you have a death and something happens and you need to recover some bots. You can always just know, especially as a druid, you can stealth by mobs. So as your team is fighting a pack, if it's easy, you can just stealth yourself away to grab the bots if you need them. You can pretty much fill up all 3 bots in this area just by stealthing and running around if you're careful. We're dealing with the last monstrosity here. Most of the other stuff in this area isn't super worth pulling, so we're just killing this and dragging it over to the boss where it spawns. We actually leave a couple mobs by the boss on purpose because the RP of the squirt bots takes some time, so we want something to do while we wait for the boss. This is not too exciting, so we'll skip ahead to Gunker. Looks like we decided to pull this slime for some reason. Here's another lurker pack of the slime elementals. Again, watch out for the slime wave. Nothing super exciting here. Okay, now we go into the boss. Remember that this boss is going to put you in global combat immediately, so make sure you're full mana. So generally the way you play this boss is, at least I just stand in the squirt bots as much as possible, so I don't have to worry about the spells that he uses. So it's important here to be paying attention to who needs healing. So just taking a look at my frames, I see that Psycho is in meta and Junkrat also has a leech buff. So I'm mainly focused on healing Chow because I can keep Life Bloom on myself. So hopefully if I'm playing well on my healing here, I'm focusing most of my healing on our tank and Chow. Sometimes the mage likes to go far away, so you have to be careful. My general mindset here when I'm playing Soul of the Forest Prosperity is I'll use Swiftmend on the mage or whoever's the squishiest, and then I'll Wild Growth off of the boss. If you've watched some of my other videos, you may know you can actually Wild Growth off of enemies, and it does the effect on your allies 30 yards around. So for instance, you can hit the mage from far away if he's on the other side of the boss. So you can see here I have most of my hots on myself, the mage. I'm throwing some out on our rogue. I'm paying close attention to my mana compared to the boss's health. Because this is almost like a straight patchwork healing fight, you can just compare your mana to the boss's health. And if you see that you're starting to pull ahead, you can start to use your higher stuff. You can use your Ever-Rising Tide Major to help catch up a little bit. But again, just focusing a lot on my healing, especially of the mage. The way I like to do this is, again, I'm using Swiftmends on the mage or the soft targets, then I'm wild growthing. Then when you run out of... Oh, wow, what is going on here? We are in a very difficult situation. I think if you wild charge over those, you actually get gooped. You have to be very, very careful, especially if you're grouped far away from the boss and your team can't cleave you. But anyway, as I was saying, as I'm running out of Swiftmend charges, that's when I'll use my cooldowns. So for example, I'll blow a couple Swiftmend charges, then I'll use my Trank to catch up, and then I hopefully won't have to use my Swiftmends for a little bit, and I can let them recover. Then I'll use my Swiftmends again. Then at that point, maybe I can use my Innervate and just spam a bunch of regrowths and save my Swiftmends and my mana. And then by that time, hopefully you're ahead on mana, and you can start spamming Ever-Rising Tide. You can see I'm sort of preparing for a higher boss here, so I'm not using all the mana at my disposal, but at this point, late into the fight, you can just be using your Ever-Rising Tide just to ensure the safe kill. We're not 100% sure on count. I think we're a bit short, so we decide to pull the Slime Elemental just for safety. At this point, we have all 3 of the bosses down and 80% count. We know we're very, very far ahead of the timer, so we're just like, well, let's grab this mob. I think it's a good idea to know working count of the mobs, but even if you don't, it's a good idea to know certain checkpoints. For example, even if you don't know where you should be in count all the way, maybe you know right here, right? You know that once you kill all 3 bosses, know that you need to have at least 260 count or whatever, right? That way you kind of have a checkpoint so you know that you don't commit yourself too hard and you end up far away. That's sort of how I try and learn timings or counts in dungeons. Is I don't memorize every single spot or know every single route. I mainly just kind of keep track of certain checkpoints of when it's important to know when you need to, if you have enough count or if you don't. So this area can be a little bit dangerous to tanks. Again, we're playing safe here, so we're not pulling too much. I guess this is still kind of a big pull. So there's 2 important mechanics here. Number 1 is the Nano Slicer. It's a stacking bleed on the tank, and it stacks, I think, infinitely. So you want to watch out and see how many stacks your tanks get. Certain tanks can block or parry or dodge them, so it could be a varying amount of healing that you need to do. So we have 3 on our tank right now, which isn't too bad, and it also manages to reset, which is nice. The other important mechanic is Shrink. Shrink makes somebody tiny, reduces their damage, but most importantly, if you step on them while they're shrunk, it squishes them, kind of like the I don't even remember the boss name in Desire Lore anymore. The guy with the shapes and the colors. High Tinker Mechatorque. So you have to be ready to dispel that shrink quickly. You can see that I have the Big Wigs alert for the shrink on the middle of my screen anytime it's cast. That way I'm hopefully ready to dispel it right away. Again, because it's bolstering, we opt to do this area in 2 pulls, but if it wasn't bolstering, you could probably chain this together. You see now, even just this small pack here of 4 guys put 4 stacks of the bleed on our tank, whereas the other bigger pull only had 3. So it's good to keep track of the bleed. Also, our tank had a lot of stacks of the Eye of Corruption as well. So I believe we're doing the pack before the boss. This is first the Fear Obelisk. Nothing too exciting here. This guy is really, really easy because you have Zap Bots. So just playing safe. Nothing super important to learn here. We can probably skip ahead. I'm dying from Thing from Beyond. Okay, so it's very important to save time that you kill this boss in one phase. So we're looking to get all the damage that we can possibly get here, especially for the 29, which we're not quite sure yet. So we're using a strategy here where we keep this mob, the Mechagon Renormalizer. Not only does it cast Shrink, but it also casts a buff called Enlarge that is a massive damage buff that a mage can spell steal. And so the strategy that we're using is we're clearing this whole pack except for the Renormalizer, then keeping it so that the mage can spell steal it and then just keep it sheeped. That way it could have the buff for the Combust. The one thing I also want to point out about these cavalry is it's this rapid fire, the sprinkler thing, is a frontal that's always pointed at the tank. So if it's, for instance, a moment like this where you have limited visibility where you can't see it, always just stay on the opposite side of the cavalry as the tank, and you will never get targeted by that. Or rather, you will never have to worry about it. It does a very large amount of damage, so it's something that you don't want to stand in. So now that we have that pack and we're getting ready to pull the boss, we are dealing with this Renormalizer dude here. I think what happens is we're waiting for Combust. Just mage things. We're just going to sit here and wait for Combust. Our mage is going to kick the Shrink, and then when he uses Enlarge, spell steal it, and then blow his Combust on the boss. So actually he shrunk our rogue and I dispelled it. So here we go, he grabbed the Enlarge, and now we're pulling the boss right away. we're doing this obelisk with the boss. Because the boss has nothing to kick, it can be a good idea to do this, but for safety, you can also just do this obelisk separately. So this boss has two main pretty heavy damage dealing moves. The Fulminating Zap targets random party members and does a lot of damage to them. And the boss has a sort of like blade combo-esque spell called Wreck that it uses on the tank that does a lot of damage as well. So you have to watch out for both of those things. You can see that here he's using Wreck on the tank now while the Fulminating Blast is on the Demon Hunter. Remember that the tank always takes priority. I get hit by the cast from the spider, but because I have a million versatility and a welding bot, I live. Our Demon Hunter is getting heavily under attack by the Fulminating Blast. You can see there's another Wreck going off. It can hit up to 3 times, and ideally your tank blocks or parries or dodges that, but if they don't, it can hurt real bad. Our Demon Hunter's targeted again. This is a situation where I may want to use Ever Rising Tide here just to sort of start digging us out. So you'll see what I do here. This is how I use Master Root. I look for 2 of them to be grouped together and I Master Root them, and then I use my single root on one of them that's solo. Our tank is getting wrecked again, and I bark him for that one. I try and bark for as many of the wrecks as I can. If you have a really sturdy tank like a Prot Warrior, you can choose to just use Iron Bark on the Fulminating Blast as opposed to the wreck. So this little minigame maze sort of deal, you can wild charge over it, and you can also just jump. You can see our tank doing it there. I found that it's pretty buggy and pretty unreliable, and I choose not to do it. If you wanted to do it, you're more than welcome to, but for big keys, I generally just walk it. I use the Grandma strats. So usually what's done here is you have a limited amount of time that you can damage the actual boss. So once it's about to be active, you have everyone come down and get ready, have your fonts, all your cooldowns, and get ready for the boss, and have just one tank waiting up, ready to activate it. Once he activates it, everyone comes down, you blow Lust, you blow Combust, all your cooldowns. You as a healer can also activate it too, especially if you are playing with a tank that you think has significantly more damage than you. You can have him go down instead if he's running a bunch of Twilight devs or something. And that's it. Ideally, you burst on the boss. You can see that I had saved my mana potion as well as a lot of mana in case I needed to deal with another phase, but each phase lasts about 2 minutes, so making sure that you one phase this boss is pretty important. You can see we do it pretty clearly, and that's it. That is the end of 28 Junkyard. Thanks for watching. If you liked the video, if you want to see more content, I'd appreciate it if you gave it a like and subscribe to my channel. I'll be doing a dungeon commentary for every dungeon in BFA, and definitely more for Shadowlands when they come out as well. Happy keying, friends.